Hello, everyone, and welcome to the next episode of Art Side of Life, where it's all about how you can turn your creative passion into a profession. My name is Eva, and my guest today is amazing digital and watercolor artist originally from Canada, now living and working in Munich, Germany. He always wanted to become a professional artist, but first pursued music and writing as an artistic passion. His experience includes books, film, animation, and advertising. He has worked with clients like Walt Disney Publishing, Lego, LucasArts, Mattel Toys, Fisher-Price, Hasbro, and many more. He published 3 books filled with his amazing art: Imaginary Places, Small World and Creativity, and The Campfire. He is also a passionate teacher and currently teaches the Art of Color and Light at CG Master Academy, a course specifically designed to build painting fundamentals from ground up. So please welcome Marco Bucci, and let's get to the interview. Which were kind of your biggest decisions or turning points in the past when you wanted to decide, like, I want to be in art?
Ever since I was a little kid, I remember as early as 7 years old or even earlier, I would try and draw pictures in class like so many other artists, except I was really bad at it. I was not good at drawing. I was not one of the kids who could just draw naturally. And we all know those kids, right? Maybe you were one of them. I don't know. But I hated those kids because I could not draw. And so at first, it completely deflated my hopes. I thought, well, I'm not born with drawing, so I should stick to music because I was good at music. I could play the piano pretty naturally, so I stuck to that. But anyway, the art passion never died. And sometime around age 19, actually it was age 19, I started reading interviews from artists who were like in the animation industry, and they all said like you should study life drawing. Life drawing is the way to get better. So I said, oh, I'll give it a try. I've never tried that. So I found a teacher, and I actually started to learn, and I realized at that point that you can learn how to draw. Mm-hmm. So that's what gave me the turning point.
Yeah, because I read that, or maybe I heard it in one of the interviews you did. Oh yeah, that was with Will Terry, that you talked about the mentor, Nick, right, I think?
Yeah, his name is Nick Kalislian, yeah.
Yeah. So he was one of your mentors maybe, or who were other people who inspired you?
Well, inspiration, I mean, that happens so widely. But so Nick was my first teacher, and I guess one of my first inspirations. But in the wider world of art, oh man, I mean, we can just go. Let's start 100 years ago, and
no, what I mean, kind of to take your art seriously and turn your passion into the profession.
Okay. Well, getting back to Nick worked professionally and still works professionally. So I saw firsthand that you could make a living doing this. Mm-hmm. And, I remember looking at early websites like, back in 2000, there were much fewer artists online. Yeah. But I remember looking at like Craig Mullins, who I still love. I remember there's a Pixar animator named Victor Navone who still works at Pixar. He made that Alien song that went viral. And I remember looking at his, and he did a lot of posts about life drawing, and his animation that he did at home. This is 15 years ago now or more. That animation got him a job, and I'm like, oh, this is cool. Like you can get jobs just by working hard at it and pursuing it.
What was your best advice you ever received, and worst maybe?
Oh, that is a good question. Well. The worst advice comes from, it's not one person who said this, but you hear it throughout, people who only think of the monetary, the money aspect when it comes to working as an artist, mm-hmm. because often I find that the jobs, if you only evaluate jobs based on what they're going to pay you, you're probably going to run into unexpected problems because it's pay rarely ever equals the job itself. Like a job has so many more avenues to think about, like how fulfilling it might be for your mm-hmm. particular skill set, or like the things I want to paint. I've taken jobs in the past that have paid very little, but I got so much more out of it, not only by doing the art, but mm-hmm. even by exposure from it. So I'll evaluate jobs on that. So that was a piece of bad advice that I get. And oftentimes you get that kind of advice from people who are not artists. Typically people in the business world, not to disparage any business people, but people in the business world, they don't think like artists. And I've gotten that piece of advice a lot from that world. And I always ignore it. And I guess, I mean, I hate to sound cliche, but the best advice is really that old saying, just to follow what's in your heart. And that's a very abstract kind of saying, because you have to really think about that. And it's taken me, I mean, I'm doing this for about 15 years professionally now, and it's taken me 15 years to learn exactly what that means for me. Yeah. And it's a continued area of growth, but that is the best advice, as vague as it is.
Yeah. Because I received also some of the like bad advice in past, like, oh, you cannot live from art. That was kind of the take on it from my side, because I was like, okay, probably I can be only fine artist, and I cannot really live from it if I am not in a gallery. And now if you have so many options, what you can do, I think that's amazing.
Yeah, I agree. And it's funny because for me, I never actually wanted to be a fine artist. And even today, I do my own fine art, but I don't live on my fine art. I'm a commercial artist. I work in productions and in books and print and, advertising and stuff. I think that you didn't ask me for this, but I think a fine artist, if you want to get into fine arts, I think it's actually a very good idea to work in production art, the production art world, because you can actually get a steady paycheck in that world. And then if you have dreams of being a fine artist, yet you don't feel like you can starve for 5 years, maybe working in a production environment is just the backing you need to keep you in the art world, but you can also pursue your fine arts. I know many fine artists like that.
Yeah, because you need to make money in order to make art. So it's not it doesn't have to be the other way around. So.
Yeah, exactly. And it's nice if you're in the art world for your living. Like, I mean, you can absolutely work, say, in retail and do fine art on the side. But if you're painting during the day at work and then painting at night, I think that's the way I would want to do it anyway.
Like, good combination, yeah. And how would you describe your brand? Kind of, is there a mission or vision which goes through all of your art?
Okay, so the word brand is not a word that I think about.
Yeah.
I know it's that whole business thing. So for me, like, my personal opinion is, or just for me personally, I am not good at business. And when I hear the word brand, it reminds me of business thinking, and I instantly run away from it like it's the plague. So what I do, I do have a mission, and it's to be happy.
Yeah.
And so everything I do in painting and drawing and whatever art related is what makes me happy. So like, for example, if you look at my website, you'll see a lot of a green monster character. If you look from the outside in, you might think that that's a brand, like I'm just trying to brand that character, but it's actually not that. It's just that I love painting that character. Yeah. He seems to fit into so many pictures, and those pictures make me happy when I paint them. And he's, over the years, it's been a recurring visual thing for me to paint that character. And my educational stuff that I have, that also makes me happy. So I just pursue what makes me happy. And if there's a message I have, it's not really like a message I can put into words, but I want people to feel positive and just, brighten people's day if I can. That'd be cool.
Yeah, because all of your art pieces and all the drawings are super colorful. I love that. So yeah, it definitely like makes sense, because every time I look at it, it's like, oh, this is so cool.
Well, and yours too. I know you're very. I look at your work, and you have these nice bright faces, and you have I think you have a similar thing that I try and go for. So I feel it from you as well.
Yeah, I really like the colors. So it's so not so much about the drawing for me as well. I really like. Oh, I like these colors. Let's like do something with that.
I totally agree. I basically draw just to get to the color art.
Yeah. So I totally get you. But yeah, because when you said like the brand and the kind of this strategic positioning, because I also studied management and business. Oh, so it's kind of my way of thinking to combine both. So yeah, and most of the time they ask us kind of like, how do you position yourself in the market? Like, what is something different what you can offer to the client, to think in that way?
Oh, okay. Well, so I can answer that question without talking about business, because I guess when I decided to pursue art, professionally, all of a sudden you have to think about things like, oh, I guess let's call it branding. You have to think about, why is someone going to hire me?
Yeah.
And at first, I didn't, like 15 years ago, I didn't have an answer to that question. I thought, oh, someone's going to hire me because I really like art. But that's not, there's a million people who really like art.
Yeah.
And there's like a million people who are good at art. But what I've learned is for me, I have a focus, and that focus is light and color and like atmosphere and, just what we were talking about with colors, like very evocative colors, pretty colors, bright colors. And just happy scenes, like, whatever. I imbue that into my painting. Even if I'm painting like a horror scene, which I do sometimes, I love that genre as well. It still has, it's like people have called my horror work like cute horror, which doesn't make any sense, but that's exactly the kind of place I want to be. And it gives my paintings an identity that you can identify. Like hopefully that's a Marco Bucci painting without knowing that I did it, So I guess I brand myself that way because I paint, like I said, I paint what makes me happy, and what makes me happy is very consistent. So if after 15 years, I've accrued a portfolio that has a very similar look to it, without being repetitive. But my paintings have a similar fingerprint. And clients, as a professional freelancer now, clients seem to really respond to that, and they always attach. They always attach paintings that they like of mine, and it's always the same ones. It's like the ones with the green monster.
Yeah. Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah. Like they'll never attach the Lego cover. It's funny, even though like that's a big company, they'll never attach that one. They always say, "We love this green monster character and these characters you do. We want you to do this for us."
Yeah.
So it has worked out for me on that kind of business level.
Yeah. Okay. So they always like choose this kind of styling. Okay, that's really cool because I really like that. That's the one where the monster is sitting on the bridge, right?
That's him.
Yes,
yeah.
He's like super cute. And when you talk about like the inspiration and how you got like the happy place, is it the nature? Because also you like to travel, right? So what do you get inspiration by or from?
Yeah, well, that's another good question. I mean, I love to travel. My wife and I recently we're from Canada, but she got a job in Munich, Germany. So we packed up and moved to Germany. We're here for 3 years. And since I'm a freelancer, I can work from anywhere. Yeah. So, and travel, I mean, I love Europe because the architecture here is just, for me, it's just so much more beautiful. But so traveling and just being exposed to the world is huge for a visual person like me, because I can draw so many different things, and all that stuff goes into like your mental library, right? Yeah. And I just love, I'm into sports as well. I didn't pursue it as much as you did, but I love being outside. I run a lot. I played soccer my whole life. So whenever I can get outside, even if it's just for a 10-minute walk to get some respite from a deadline, I'll be outside walking and sketching. So I get my inspiration from that a lot, from traveling and just looking outside a lot. And these days, traveling feeds into my other inspiration, which is just getting to know how people think, just getting outside away from your desk and interacting with the world on a personal level, even if you're not drawing, just seeing how, just watching a kid play with, her father or something in a park, watching two adults arguing, just, things that people do, that all filters back into the art. So you don't have to draw sometimes to get inspiration.
So this also kind of motivates you maybe to continue, right? Or because some people feel stuck sometimes, or how do you get over the kind of procrastination, or don't have that?
Well, let's see. I was born with a pretty good work ethic. Now, when it's something I don't like, I'm terrible at it. It's absolutely terrible. Like if you tell me to mop the floor, that floor ain't getting mopped for a week.
He's
right?
Like, I don't like that.
But yeah, like I have to do it, but I'm getting better at that. I'm learning to get better at that. But anyway, when it comes to like painting, I wake up every day and I'm like, I want to paint. So there's never been a problem. The only thing I had to learn, and I've also been getting better at, is time management. And you probably know way more about this than me. I should be asking you this question, but like I have clients, right? And clients have deadlines, and there are times like where I'm like, well, I really don't want to do these 10 revisions on this job. I'd rather be outside painting watercolor, but I can't because it's due tomorrow morning. So just scheduling my time was something I had previously been quite bad at, because I didn't keep track of, like, something as simple as having a calendar on my wall. I didn't have that for the longest time, or like Google Calendars or something.
Yeah.
Now my wife really helps me with that now. We have a very detailed Google Calendar with all my jobs, when they're due, and stuff like that. It's a balance.
So you didn't have that before? You didn't use a calendar? Oh my God. Wow.
I am the world's worst business person.
But as an artist, you kind of have to be a business person as well, because you need to promote yourself somehow.
Yeah, I agree. So that's been a point of struggle for the longest time with me. And just to talk a little bit more about my wife while I can, she is a business person. Like I said, she got a job in Munich. I didn't say what it was, but she works at a big company here. Mm-hmm. And so that her brain is wired that way. We connect on many things, but one thing we're very different at is, I have an art brain and she has a business brain. Yeah. And we have been able to combine those. And as I've been with her for 5 years now, and ever since that, I've pretty much had a turning point business-wise in 5 years. Like, she's helped me get certain ducks in a row that I didn't have before, including a Google Calendar.
That's good.
I've been able to manage myself much more effectively that way.
I think it's quite necessary when you want to progress or kind of grow or expand in your experiences.
Yeah, like even making business goals, like, where do you want to be, like, job-wise in 5 years? Like, do I want to be looking for, if I'm doing jobs I don't like right now, maybe in 5 years or even 1 year, I don't want to be doing this kind of work anymore. Mm-hmm. Like, I want to do, more children's books or more whatever it is. And like, how do you get there? Yeah,
exactly. And when you're like traveling and painting outside, how is it that you simplify maybe, or how do you do the layouts and the scenes? Because they look really beautiful and simple, and when you look outside, everything is so complex and detailed. So how do you approach that?
Thank you very much. That's a great compliment. Thank you. I think... so I said this in one of my videos, but there's a human tendency to want to overcomplicate things. Mm-hmm. And in art, like nowhere is that more apparent than in painting. Because in painting, especially when you're painting from life, like you said, there's a million details out there. There's like literally thousands of leaves on a tree. And if you see only the detail, you're not likely to make an effective piece, because actually what we see is not detail. We just see the basic impression of what's in front of us. Like, that's literally how our brains work. Mm-hmm. We don't look at the details. We look at what's important about a scene. So what I try and do is I try and understand that philosophy when I'm looking at something. So if I look at a scene that, as you know, when you're driving your car through a beautiful countryside and your attention gets caught, it's not because of details, because you saw something that resonated emotionally, right? So when that happens to me and I'm like, I have to stop and paint, I first kind of do a small meditation on what exactly was that thing that caught me. Mm-hmm. And it's usually something so simple, like, I love how that sunlight is making that yellow wall really glow. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. I have to get that yellow wall to glow. Yeah. If that yellow wall doesn't glow, I missed it. Yeah. If the yellow wall glows, then I've got it. And then I can put like all the extra stuff in after, mm-hmm. So I think the strength of any good painter, like plein air painter who paints outside, is identifying, even without even the brush in their hand, identifying what it is that caught their attention, and then using the painting skills to put it down on paper.
Yeah.
Sorry, can I add one more thing?
Of course.
I always recommend to people to paint very small pictures outside, because when you paint small, it encourages you and forces you to go for that one very simple thing. When you paint a large canvas, the temptation is to go for all the detail, right? So paint small, paint with large brushes and paint small, and you will probably progress more quickly toward capturing what it is about the scene that's resonating.
Okay. And then for the layout, you do like a pencil sketch before, and then you start using colors, or that's how you do it?
Yeah, I have, but it's not even a sketch. My pencil sketch is only meant to be understood by me, because it's going to be soon painted over. Yeah. So if you saw my pencil sketch, that I do outside, it's brutal, but it's just composition. It's like, I want a building to be over here, and then I want this object to be over here. So I'll just put little markings. Mm-hmm. And yeah, and if it's something is like, let's say something is shaped like a triangle, I'll draw it literally like a triangle, literally like a circle. So it's very, very basic.
Ah, okay. And how would you compare it with the digital? Because you paint also in Photoshop. So, of course, sometimes in digital softwares, we are like, oh, yeah, I can always go back and fix my mistakes. So
Yeah.
how would you compare these two mediums? Like, what is good about each, or maybe how would you approach this?
The thing that I love so much about traditional media and why I still continue to use it is because you can't go back. I mean, you can, but you have to paint over your stuff. Like you can't undo is what I'm trying to say. Yeah. So it develops not only a bravery, but a respect for the process. Whereas if you can undo and you can put things on layers, you almost bypass that development of having a respect for what it is you're doing and for your own decision making, right? Like I need to know when I'm outside painting, I need to know that the decision I just made is good to build on.
Yeah.
Whereas if I want to undo everything, you're kind of like eroding that from the ground level. And if you don't trust your own decisions, I don't care what software you're using, you're not going to be able to produce good work. So that's why when I work in digital paint, I approach digital paint very much the same. I try and work on one layer as much as possible, and I try and get myself to not use the software's bells and whistles, and in order to commit to something. What do you think about that, Iva? I'm wondering.
Yeah, because I started actually digitally, so it's super hard to go back to the traditional. And like when I look at some of your paintings, it's really like challenging. I was like, oh my God, I should do this. And yeah, so it's still really hard for me to do the traditional because I'm still learning as well. I think as everyone all the time.
Yeah.
But yeah, for me, like Photoshop is much easier, and the traditional paint I'm not so used to yet.
Yeah, I mean, Photoshop certainly is easier, but when you learn how to work with the pigments and the physical materials, I find that like actually knowing how to manipulate those really helps with the Photoshop stuff because it just opens the doors. Like, when you work digitally and you see your paint as pixels, it's just a little different. Like when I digital paint, I still think of pigment and mixing on a canvas. Whereas if you don't have that traditional backing, I mean, I think it would be harder to produce convincing work on a computer.
Yeah, it is. And I just started also just like a live drawing classes because I also haven't done that before. So.
Oh, excellent.
So I'm like, okay, I should do this and I should try this. And yeah, because when I started, it was more like Illustrator work, like logo design and characters in Illustrator. And then I moved more to the Photoshop and draw the characters and environment there. So,
well, that's interesting because for you must have developed a really strong aspect of design and like your design sense. And you can totally bring that to figure drawing. I mean, I worked the reverse. When I first started figure drawing, I had no sense of design. Like I said, I couldn't draw. So I had nothing. I had to learn like the structure and form and building form and anatomy and all that academic stuff. And then only later did I learn design. You're kind of going the opposite way where you have that design, which is really cool. So I'd be interested in seeing, how you develop in the figurative area with a strong design sense.
Yeah, for sure, because I had to learn by myself because as I studied management and design, then in Denmark I studied multimedia design, which I thought it will be more about design, but it was more about programming websites. So, I'm like, okay, I need to learn Photoshop and Illustrator by myself. So it was kind of like here and there and YouTube and online courses and and people like you online. So thank you.
Yeah. Oh, my pleasure. There's so much online. It's so crazy. Like, if I were to be a student just starting now, I don't know if you have to go enroll in an art school. Like there's so much online. It's crazy.
Yeah. So you can like choose, and you started now your Patreon, right? And YouTube videos.
Yeah. I was reluctant at first to start a Patreon because I thought that was just another way of business kind of infiltrating art. Mm-hmm. But then actually, well, of course, it was my wife who looked into Patreon and she's like, no, you're not beholden to any of your patrons. They are just wanting to support you for what you already do. Mm-hmm. And once I learned that, I'm like, oh, well, I can definitely keep doing what I'm already doing.
Yeah.
So we made a Patreon, and I'm super flattered and humbled that anyone would want to, chip in financially. So if any of my patrons are listening, thank you sincerely.
Yeah, I think it's really cool because if someone just, for example, want to invite for a coffee or so, that it's like $5, for example, or euros, and they can just support you in Patreon. So
Yeah.
how do you find new projects or new paid projects? Because when you started, of course, after school, then you have to build some networking and maybe how
Yeah.
it was then and how it is now.
Yeah. Okay. So starting with how it was then, like I mentioned earlier, I looked for work first in the animation industry, and I found work there.
Yeah.
And that was great because it's, like I said, it's a regular paycheck. It's a 9 to 5 kind of job. So you don't have to worry about finding new clients. And what that time in the animation industry afforded me, of course, is experience and a paycheck, but also it took that pressure off, so I could build a network over time, almost without even trying. Because as I put work out there on, back then it was Blogger. Blogger's dead now, but I would put work on Blogger, and also DeviantArt and YouTube. People started finding me just through the online network. And my first few freelance jobs happened totally by accident. I was not looking for freelance work because I was employed at a studio. Yeah, so people emailed me, and they were, would you be interested in doing a character design or a color key or whatever it is they wanted me to do? So I was like, oh, this is cool. I can work on the side and, make some extra cash at home while having my main job in the art industry. Then let's fast forward, let's say 6 years.
Yeah.
I had started teaching at my first teaching role was at the Academy of Art University in San Francisco. They found me through like YouTube, I think. I had a bunch of clients that I was working for, and I found that I was getting more fulfillment from my freelance work than from the studio stuff, because studio stuff tends to be pretty repetitive. I was in TV animation a lot, actually, and I just found it to be too repetitive for my liking. So I took the leap. I quit my job. Actually, I didn't quit. I let my contract expire, and then I didn't renew anything. So after my contract expired, I left that studio, and I'm just going to do freelance. And if it doesn't work, I can always get a job back at the industry again, because I've worked at at the time I'd worked at 3 or 4 animation studios, so I was not worried about going broke or anything. I can just get a job again. But it worked out for me, and it's not like it skyrocketed right away, but putting more work into it, I got more clients, and you try and increase your rates as you go. That's actually, if I can give myself credit for one business thing, I knew enough to increase my rates as I went.
Oh, that's good.
So I started very low. I don't want to, we're not going to talk numbers here, I guess, but I started a very low hourly rate. And then pretty much as I realized I was working for less than minimum wage, I started raising the rates. Yeah. And then let's fast forward another few years. I started getting more work than I could actually handle. Now that's a good problem to have, of course, but it's still a problem, because I want to spend my time not on the bookending part, the bookkeeping part. I want to spend my time on the art part. Yeah. So what I did at that point was I decided to look externally for an agent who could, manage all my incoming business, and agents. So I auditioned a few agents and almost had one misstep with one, but I found my agent that I've been with for 3, maybe 4 years now, and Shannon Associates. Kid Shannon is the branch I'm under.
Oh, okay.
So they represent me, and they're primarily in the print industry. They find me a lot of children's book work, which is what I love to do the most, is children's books and illustration. So they find me a lot of illustration. Sometimes I do character design, environment design, things like that. But I've actually, ever since my days in the animation studio, I've actually migrated away from the film and TV part of things to focus more on illustration, because I find that as an illustrator, I get to do characters and backgrounds and finish paintings, whereas in TV, I was like only doing color or only doing concept, which is, they're all cool, but I like bringing all of those to a peak.
Yeah. Because like also in animation, then you are like a background artist or layout or something like that. Okay, yeah.
Exactly. So I found after a few years, I stagnated. I can paint backgrounds now. Like I want another challenge, but good luck if you're in the industry. Good luck switching from background paints to character design, they're just not going to let you do it, like, because they hire specialty people, right?
Yeah, yeah. I was actually surprised to see that because I was first time on CTN last year. And
Oh, yeah.
when I was talking to some of the studios or people around, I was like, yeah, we want you to be this or this. And I'm like,
Yeah.
I don't want that.
Yeah, yeah, I totally agree. So, like, for some people,
Yeah.
they'll be very amenable to that. Like, they'll want to just focus. But like I said, if you look at my website, it's clear that I like painting the whole thing. So an illustrator is just the best way for me to go.
Yeah.
By the way, how do you like CTN?
Yeah.
I've never been.
Oh, no. Oh, my God. You have to
No.
go.
I know.
And I really like the atmosphere because you had so many workshops, you can meet so many people, and basically you can fill your days with a lot of stuff.
That's really cool. Yeah, I mean, I've been to many conventions, but I have not been to CTN. I've got to make my way over to California. Los Angeles, right? Is that where it is?
Yes.
Or
Yeah. Up in Burbank, I think. Yeah.
Burbank. Okay. Well, one day I'll make it out there.
Yeah. So
it's a little harder when we live in Europe.
that's true. But there will be something in Amsterdam and Berlin. There is some convention, I think, in September.
Oh, really? I'll look into that. Because Berlin is very close to me here. So
because I was just doing research now, maybe which one I should go to. So Berlin might be interesting for you too, because
I will definitely look into it. Thanks.
Yeah, cool. And also, what I wanted to ask you about it was as well when you are mentioning different projects, like how do you combine your income sources, or do you have a different incomes built into one, or do you have one main?
So my main source of income is freelancing. Is that what you're asking?
Yeah.
Oh, so my job, like my day job, is a freelancer.
Mm-hmm.
So I try and keep my schedule as full as possible. And with the agent, with clients I've already established before I got the agent, I'm thankful for it. But I'm booked 100% of the time. I mean, obviously, some days I'll be extremely busy, and some days I won't. Some weeks I won't have that much, but I always, I'm thankful to always have a pretty full workload, a pretty full schedule. And like I said, I'm trying to manage that schedule so I can still remember to go outside and paint just for myself, because I need that. In terms of passive income, I have produced many videos that I sell online. Like I have an online store.
Yeah.
About my YouTube channel, which has tons of free content just because I love to teach. But you can follow links from there to my online store and my Gumroad account, for example, where I sell longer, more not sped up painting videos or more fundamental videos. So I guess that's passive income because I made them a few years ago and I'm continuing to sell those. And I do plan to make more. In fact, I just bought a GoPro camera. Cool. And it hooks up to my watercolor easel.
Yeah.
So nice. I started filming my plein air paintings outdoors, and I'll be releasing those. Just like each video will just be one painting. And my goal is to price those very low because they're just short little paintings, but hopefully will help people as well. But I don't want to flood my YouTube channel with it. So I guess I keep a passive income source that way. Patreon helps for that as well. And that kind of thing just really helps me continue to make the educational content, which I also love to do, but can't always find the time for.
Yeah, but it's really cool. It will be in the show notes under the video.
Oh,
so
cool.
And
thank you.
Yes, of course. We need to support each other. So I think it's really cool. And
yeah.
Yeah, and what I wanted to ask you as well, it was, what are the most exciting projects right now, or upcoming ones? What do you want to share?
Well, there's 3 dirty letters called NDA, which means the one I'm most excited about right now, I can't actually talk about. But it's it's a book, an illustrated book, and it's going to allow me to paint. Let's call it not photoreal, but photographic, but still painterly. That's the intended style. And if it all goes well, it will be seen by a very large audience. So that is what I'm excited about now. I wish I could tell you more. I'm sorry to be cryptic, but I'm legally binded and I can't talk about it. But other than that, though, I'm really excited about some of my own projects, projects that, aren't paying me anything. Just I have some stories I want to tell that if you look behind me, I have a corkboard there.
Yeah.
That's I'm mapping out just stories that that are floating around in my head.
Oh, cool.
So I'm hoping that there's a few stories on there. So I'm hoping that one or two of those I can put into my own production schedule soon. I've been planning my own children's book, for example, with that green monster character. I'm just deciding which direction to go with that. If I should try and get it commercially published, like through a publisher, or should I maybe try a Kickstarter that self-publish or something like that? I'm not sure. So I'm excited about those too.
Yeah. Oh, super cool. Yeah. That's, I mean, really nice. Looking forward to see some of your new books.
Oh yeah. Well, books are really expensive to produce, and I'm not sure when I'll do another one, to be honest. So a children's book obviously would be a book.
Yeah.
But more and more I'm like, just publish the stories online, like just have it on an online interface.
Yeah.
I'm experimenting with that too. I haven't made any concrete decisions, and I do love the physical book. Like I love that stuff. So I might go to the book route. I'm not sure.
Yeah, because I actually heard that you can self-publish on Amazon, kind of like ready to order, but I'm not sure how it is with the picture books, because if you don't have any images, it's easier to kind of to order it. And I think you pay per page somehow when people order it. So you actually produce ebook, and when someone orders it, then they print it out and send it.
Really? So they print, like, if someone orders one book, they print one book and send it?
I'm not sure about the details or what is the volume, but I heard it in one of the podcasts. So there is definitely that option. But I think that needs to be more researched how it works.
Well, yeah, that sounds really interesting. I'll have to look into that, because one of the things that I don't like is, having my basement full of like 1,000 print run of books, which is cool. Like, it's cool to have that. But like you said, I've put out 3 books now, and like, obviously you're not going to sell 1,000 books in quite a while, right? So like my basement has boxes of books, and I'd rather not have to carry that kind of stock. So, if Amazon offers a solution, I'll look into that.
Do you have a favorite book you would share with others? Like someone needs to read this, of course, on the side of your books, because that's for sure.
Oh, well, I would say that, oh man, so I love to read, and I have a million books I'd recommend, but in terms of art, if there's one art book I could recommend, it's called The War of Art by Steven Pressfield.
Okay.
It's a very small book. That book largely inspired the book I wrote. Not the content, but like the physical quality of it. It's a very short book. It's about let's say it's 100 pages. It's like pocket size. You can read it. I read it in like a couple hours. I was waiting for my wife. She was at some interview, and I read the whole book like while I was waiting for her. And since then, I've read it like 2 more times, and then I downloaded the audiobook and I listened to it. So that book has been very influential. Steven Pressfield's a writer. He writes a lot of fiction. He wrote The Legend of Bagger Vance, for example.
Okay.
People know that because of the movie, but and he's wrote tons more. And he has a way of looking at the art process that's very like sober. There's nothing magical about it, which is exactly how I see it.
Yeah.
So it's almost like chicken soup for the soul when I read his book. But because he's a professional writer, which is really to say he's a professional thinker, he's really boiled things down into very digestible language that clarified a lot of my own thoughts.
Yeah.
So while in the book I wrote about creativity, I didn't plagiarize any of his stuff, at least I hope I didn't, but he really inspired me to think a lot deeper and more clearly about what you believe in terms of how creativity works.
Yeah, because...
So that's The War of Art by Steven Pressfield.
Good. I will put it in the show notes as well.
There you go.
And you like to write as well. So you are writing your own books, or do you have someone transcribing your text?
Yeah, I mean, I'm a hobbyist writer. I'm definitely not a professional writer, but I love language. I love to read. I love what you can do with language. It's very different than pictures. I just like how you can, I really respect writers who can think about something beyond what most people do and then actually communicate it in text. So like for me, it's a joy to write my YouTube lessons, because that's very much writing. I start with a script.
Oh, okay.
I just spend hours on the script. So I have all the jokes and everything kind of mapped out in a script form, and then I produce it, in video. But so whenever I write my own stuff, and I'm hoping to do more of that, like the planning stuff in the background I just showed you. I really hope to do more of that. Yeah.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, because I mean, I am terrible at writing, so that's like, wow, congrats.
Well, me too. I mean, writing is hard because the first time, I mean, it's kind of like drawing, but writing is weird because you might, like, I challenge anyone watching this, if you haven't written before, you might think you have thoughts in your head, but try writing them down and see how garbled they actually are. And what you do then is edit. And editing is where you find clarity. And you actually, in finding that clarity, I find you you sharpen your own thinking. And you do it right on the page. It's this really cool interface that you have with the written word on the page. It's like your thoughts are there, and you can like literally sculpt them on the page. And for me, that's another way of painting, really.
Yeah. And is there something which simplifies your life when you are creating either the drawings or writings? Some kind of product, what you bought, maybe?
Well, I mean, I don't know if this answers your. I still love my old my tablet.
Yeah.
I've had this tablet for 7-8 years now. I don't use a Cintiq or anything. I love this little tablet because I can carry it wherever I go. So when I'm at home, it sits on my desk. You know, it's funny. I'll show. This is hilarious. So okay, this is my desk.
Yeah.
So can you see the monitor? There's a Cintiq there. So let's see. No, that monitor that you're seeing there, that's a crappy LCD screen. But that monitor is a Cintiq, the newest Cintiq. That's the newest Cintiq. I hate it so much that I only use it as a monitor. I really love it as a monitor, but God. I prefer this $200 piece of junk to the $4,000 Cintiq that I currently have sitting as a monitor right now. I love how small and portable it is. I like it has like a stickiness to it. Like there's a stickiness, which reminds me of oil paint or gouache paint or something.
Yeah.
And I love that I can do anything from a quick sketch, like a line drawing, to a fully finished painting just on this one thing. And I also like how it allows me to sit back from the computer screen. Okay. Because with a Cintiq, you're up like this.
Yeah, you're just there.
Just feel like your eyes are frying inside their sockets. Yeah. I don't like that.
Yeah, because I have Cintiq as well, and sometimes when it gets super hot, then your hand starts to be too warm, and then it's like...
And it gets all clammy and sweaty. I know.
Yeah.
I don't like... I'm not a Cintiq person. I don't like the Cintiq. I think they're really cool products. Like the technology is awesome. And I bought that one thinking I would love it. Yeah. I said I do love it as a very high quality monitor, but not as a drawing interface.
Yeah, because I have both, and I also have the Intuos and Cintiq, so I kind of swap in between. Most of the time I'm drawing on a Cintiq, then I sometimes go to traditional, and then when I'm traveling as well, I take the Intuos, which I guess that's what you have, right?
Yeah, it's an Intuos 3. Yeah, perfect. So like what Intuos do you have? Like the really small one?
I think it's 4.
Oh, the Intuos 4. Okay, yeah. So I'm still on the 3, but I love the Intuos line. That was my first, the first product I ever bought, like a drawing product that was that, and I still love it.
Yeah, because sometimes people are wondering what they should start with, and kind of what would you recommend to start with?
Yeah, I would say start as cheaply as you can. But, I mean, I really recommend the product, the Wacom, whatever you call it, the Wacom family of products, because to me, they're just the best products out there. But you can start with the Bamboo, which is their opening line of tablets, I believe. And I think there are other ones now. I haven't kept up with it, but I think there's like the Art Draw or something like that. But, the Intuos is awesome. Like I said, I still use the Intuos. And then you can work your way up to a Cintiq. It's kind of like, you want to beat up an old Honda before you get a Ferrari, right?
Yeah. And from traditional tools, do you have some favorite one?
So when I paint outside in a small sketchbook, I really like the Moleskine or Moleskine, whatever you call it, watercolor book.
Yeah.
That's very nice paper. It takes a beating with water, without buckling. That's very good. But when I paint, and I use just any old brush I can, because the sketches are so small that the brushes don't need to be that high quality. Yeah. So just a bunch of rounds or flats. Really, I use my old brushes from my studio when I travel. But when I travel with a larger watercolor setup, like the videos I'm filming now are my easel watercolor setup with that's 12 by 16 inch. So it's a little larger. I need higher quality for that. So I use I like Saunders 140 pound cold press paper. And I like brushes from a company called Escoda.
Okay, that's
for me. They just make. Yeah, they're based in Spain, so in Europe we can get them pretty easily.
Yeah.
I actually just ordered a batch from their warehouse just yesterday.
Okay.
So, because I like with watercolor, I find for me, I really need a sharp point. So I get round brushes because with a round brush they have a sharp tip, but it tapers wider at the base.
Yeah.
So you can get a thick stroke or a very thin stroke with just one brush. And I keep my materials very high quality when it comes to watercolor.
Yeah.
And I just use Winsor Newton paint.
Okay, because I need to still try some of them, so I need to pick your brain. What should I try?
Oh yeah, yeah. So if you're my recommendation, if you're painting in a small sketchbook, just get a very small palette of you can even use dry color. I don't use dry color. I use a small palette that I squeeze wet watercolor onto, and I let that wet watercolor dry on the palette.
Yeah.
And then the cool thing with watercolors, you just take a spray bottle and spray those watercolors and they come back to life on the palette.
True.
So you can do that too. And then I also recommend when you're outdoor sketching is bring along some white gouache paint. Because oftentimes the watercolor is not the best for really small studies. You sometimes need a bit of opacity. And gouache really, really helps that. So whenever you see a sketchbook study of mine, there's always some gouache in it too. But and I achieve gouache by, like I said, white gouache mixed with watercolor will get you basically gouache.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's really cool.
Anyway, I could go on for days about painting outdoors.
Yeah, because I don't want to keep you too long here, so that's why I wanted to as well ask about the future. Where do you see yourself in 5 years, or what would be your goal 5 to 10 years? And imagine you cannot fail. This is where I'm going to be.
All right. Okay. Well, I mean, I'd like to think I approach it as if I could not fail anyway. Although I do fail, but you approach it as if you can't. I would say in 5 years, I would be happy with myself if I were able to produce a lot of my personal projects in 5 years. I mean, I have produced my personal projects up till this point, but I would like to get to the point where maybe I could do a little less freelance and a little more personal stuff. Because like I said, I have so many story ideas and you just can't do them all, right? You have to focus on kind of one at a time.
Yeah.
Maybe it'd be cool to get to the point where I could take on some freelance work that would maybe pay me enough that I could maybe dedicate half the week to just my personal work. That would be really cool.
Yeah.
So if in 5 years I'm doing that, or maybe in 5 years I can just do my personal work, that would be awesome. I would think that if I had to define success, maybe this would take more than 5 years, but success for me is being able to just do my personal work and be fully compensated as if I were working for clients. That would be amazing.
Yeah, yeah. So you need to build more passive income. That's really cool.
My wife tells me that too, and we're working on it.
That's super cool. I mean, I would love to see that because all of your books are super cool. So.
Oh, thanks so much.
It would be nice to inspire more people. And I wanted to ask you as well, is there something you wish you knew before you started your career?
Ooh, that's a good question. I would say I wish I knew that, I wish I knew that getting a job is not the end goal. Because I think for me, and I think for a lot of students and people starting out, the job is the success defining thing. But really, you get disabused of that very quickly, I think, when you actually work in the art industry. The job is not the goal. Jobs are nice because they pay your bills. But paying your bills is not why you're alive, right?
Yeah.
We are artists because we love to paint, and paying your bills is not the same thing. So while it's nice to be able to pay your bills with art, I'd say that I wish I knew that really just happiness comes from being able to go outside and paint. And I think that I can't remember where I heard this. I think it was on the Joe Rogan podcast. If I can afford to buy myself a nice meal and maybe have some savings, that's what I'm looking for. I'm not looking to be a millionaire. I'm just looking to be able to live comfortably enough where I can go travel to, Zurich and have a weekend in Zurich while not so much worrying about it. And that will allow me to go out there and paint and explore what it is that makes me happy. And that's what I wish I knew 15 years ago, rather than being so dogmatic about, I got to work at Pixar in 10 years or I'm a failure. That's really not what it's like.
Yeah, because that was also in the book 4 Hour Workweek, where he talked about it's new rich. If you're a millionaire, you never have time to actually enjoy your money. So this is kind of how you balance your life, that you can still have like free time and you have enough money to do what you want. So.
Oh, nice. I've been meaning to read that book, but it's cool to know that there's some parallel thinking there.
Yeah, definitely. Read it. That's a good one.
I will. Yeah, I've been meaning to.
And he also did a new one, which is called Tools of the Titans. So he's kind of combining like learnings.
Oh, cool. Who is the author?
Tim Ferriss. Hopefully.
Tim Ferriss. And he has the podcast.
Yes. Yeah.
I have heard the Tim Ferriss podcast on a bunch of road trips, and I really enjoy it. So I got to check out his book.
Yeah. So that's the one. And I would like to end with the question about like, how would you like to be remembered in 100 years?
Ooh. Well, I have to be honest. I've never asked myself that question. So I guess I don't have an answer for you. But if I'm making one up on the spot here, it would be a huge bonus if anyone is still looking at my art in 100 years. Did you say 100 years or 10 years?
The 100.
100 years. Jeez. I will be dust. I will be eaten and pooped out by many animals in 100 years, and probably my art will be too. But hey, if people are still looking at my art in 100 years, that's incredible. And I would say that would be the ultimate success anyone could ever obtain. So like, someone like John Singer Sargent, we're still admiring his work. Yeah. In fact, this weekend, I'll be in Edinburgh, Scotland for my first time, and I'm going to see one of my favorite paintings ever, which is Lady Agnew by John Singer Sargent. And, if I could possibly reach that level, that would be ungodly cool. But that's not why I'm doing it, though. I'm just doing it, like I said, to keep myself happy and live a good life.
Yeah. And what would be your favorite quote? Do you have a favorite quote?
Well, I keep saying, I'm like, no, I don't really. Sorry, I don't mean to be a downer. I have a quote that just popped into my head just now, and I can't remember who said it, but it was a writer, and I'll have to get you the name so we can credit this quote properly. But basically the quote was, all the first draft has to do is exist. So again, all the first draft has to do is exist. You just have to pull it into existence. It doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to be like the masterpiece that you have hopefully in your head. Because it's so true that we think that, I have this amazing idea. It has to come out beautifully and perfectly the first time. Yeah. But that's completely not how creativity works. So that quote, I'll get you the author's name, but that quote by that author, she was talking about writing. I think she was talking about writing, but it's so applicable to art and anything.
Yeah.
The first draft just has to exist.
It's really nice to kind of end the discussion with this quote. I think it's really cool. So people shouldn't be afraid to just produce something and put it out there. Absolutely.
Produce it and then edit it. Make it better. But the first draft just has to be on paper, and then you can go from there.
Yeah. So thank you so much for being here, and everyone for joining us.
Oh, thank you, Ava. I've had such a great time talking to you. And I'm humbled that I'm among your first few guests on your podcast. And I wish you all the best with your work. And I'm not kidding. If I'm ever in Zurich or you're ever in Munich, let's meet each other and have a coffee.
For sure. Thank you so much.
And thanks, everyone, for listening to this. I appreciate your time.
Hey guys, if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and let me know in comments. Also, please subscribe to my channel for more videos because I post new interview every single workday. You can also find the resources mentioned in this episode at artsideoflife.com. Just type a guest name in the search bar. There is also a little freebie waiting for you, so go check it out. If you want to listen to the interviews on the go, make sure to check out the podcast episodes at artsideoflife.com/podcast. Thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate you, and don't forget to inspire each other. I will see you guys in the next episode.